G'day guys, what's cracking? It's Ralph here, and today I want to show you how you can take these kind of photos. I'm at Cascade Gardens, and those photos I took half an hour before pressing record on this video. There's a few things that I've learned over the years that I want to offer to you to enable you to come out and take those same images. Because at one stage in my life I thought it was impossible to take those images, but now I know how and I want to share it with you. First thing you're going to need is a macro lens for your DSLR or mirrorless camera. This is a Nikon 2.8 105mm macro lens and enables you to get really close to the subject. So I started with this and I realized quite quickly it wasn't quite enough to get the results I wanted, and so to this I added a flash. Now it doesn't really matter which flash you use, it doesn't really matter how powerful it is, because the power you're going to use at 1/8 is going to be able to adapt to any camera and any flash that you use. You don't need a full bright, oh my gosh, the sun has come out in my eyes flash. So you stick a flash on top, but then the challenge is that this light is too harsh on your subject. What I mean by harsh is it creates too many highlights and too many shadows. So you need to diffuse this light, and lucky for you, I've got a hack. The hack is this: it's a plant pot with a foil inside and a diffuser on the front, and flips just down like that, and it means this light coming out is far more spread and it's far softer, which enables the details of the subject that you're trying to photograph to really come to life. I'll put a video at the end of this about how you make this. It's a short and it's dead easy. Then I discovered that that wasn't quite enough, that I needed more magnification. Now, short of buying a camera with more megapixels, I chose a Raynox. What? A Raynox? Raynox is like a magnifying glass that you stick on the front of your lens like so, and it enables you to increase the magnification. Means you can get really close to the subject. So that's the gear I use, and as you can tell, I built up to it. So build up to it. You can employ what I'm about to teach you now to any macro lens photography, but I would assume you have a macro lens, otherwise you're not going to be able to get the results that you really want to get. I'm currently in the Cascade Gardens of the Gold Coast. As you can see from this footage, it is a beautiful location in the heart of the city, but it's important to go somewhere where there are insects, where there is life and intricacy to be photographed. The stock settings, my shutter speed is on 160. You can shoot 160 when you have a flash on. My flash is set to 1/8 of power, but depending on the power of your flash, you'll need to judge what that looks like. It's also through a diffuser, so it needs to be bright enough to push through the diffuser, but not bright enough to wash out your subject. If there's a lot of sun out, you obviously decrease the power of your flash. For aperture, I go anywhere north of 16, f-stop 16, and for some of you are like, what? But this aperture on this lens goes up to f-stop of 40, and I would not recommend going up to 40 because the light diffracts and it distorts and blurs an image, but I operate between 16 and 25, so I'm not afraid to go there. And there's probably some of you that are like, you shouldn't do that, and if you shouldn't do that, can you please explain why in the comments below? I try to shoot with the minimum ISO possible for the light that I want, but sometimes you shoot with the flash with it all set up and you look at your image and it looks dark and you realize you need more light. You don't want to change your aperture, you don't want to change your shutter speed because of the movement in the image, and so then you go to ISO. And I'd operate ISO on these cameras anywhere between 100 and 1200. You should be safe, but when you're operating in macro, you push in really close and noise can become a factor. Now, if you're shooting with a Nikon Z series camera, you should realize that if you put it on this setting, which is 12 frames a second, it will not activate the flash, so you need to have it on 5, I think, frames a second or less. But I would recommend on shooting on 5 frames a second or more, and have a flash that can kind of keep up with you as you go, if you can afford it. Now, the fascinating thing about insects is when they're crawling along here, they will often take a certain path and they will repeat that path. So they will come and they will go. So their movements, like with all animals, become predictable. So I would just encourage you to look for the predictable patterns of that which you're hunting. And then I would say you need to hunt. Don't just wait and stop, but go in pursuit of them. Insects jet about, they're really quick, they like to move, but they do have these moments where they pause. They don't necessarily pause when you've got your camera ready, so you have to go and hunt them. You have to go and find them. Now, every macro photography thing talks about ethics, so let's talk about ethics for 5 seconds. Don't kill the insects, just photograph them. Now, when photographing, there are 2 schools of thought about autofocus or manual focus. I interchange between both. If you go manual, you use your camera and the space the camera is away from your subject to focus. Yeah, And if you use auto, you have to hold your camera really still and allow the autofocus to move. It also depends, you see this? It's moving in the breeze. There's a little bit of a breeze. Wind sucks when it comes to macro photography. So choose a day when it's not really blazing with sun. It's a beautiful condition day today. It's really overcast. It's perfect for diffuse light. And choose a day when there's not wind blowing around. It just makes things much more hard, and you need to shoot in a higher shutter speed, which means you lose the amount of light coming into the shot, and the end result is lessened because of that. So once you have your subject ready to go and you're focusing, I do two things. I either use my eye, I turn my cap around and I just focus like this and I'm ready to go. Or what I've found is sometimes it's in a peculiar situation, or sometimes you can't hold your camera still enough, and so I tend to flip out the screen, position the screen, use two hands to cradle and hold the camera really still and view where it is, and then boom. I don't know if you've ever looked through a macro lens, but when you look at it, everything looks really zoomed in, and sometimes it's hard to work out where the thing you're actually photographing is. And so I tend to line up the camera through my line of sight by looking at the camera and the subject, and I go, yep, there's a line just there, and when there's a line just there and I think it's about right, I turn the camera on and then I look through it, and there you go. If you want to make the most of shooting insects, go out early in the morning or as dusk comes on. The morning's better because the light's increasing rather than decreasing. You're not racing against the time, but that's when insects are slowest and dopiest and easiest to photograph. I shoot with a Nikon Z6 and it's 24 megapixels. There have been times when I've romanticized about a 45, 46 megapixel camera for macro, because you can zoom in, you can crop in and not lose the resolution that you do lose when you crop in on this. So if I crop in, it turns to a 12 megapixel, but if I have a 45 megapixel camera and I crop in half, that takes it down to a 24 megapixel photo. It still looks banging. So if you can afford the cash, the higher the megapixel, the better results you'll get. But you can take great macro photography on a 12 megapixel camera. I dare ya. When it comes to macro photography, you want to get really good, really quick, and you won't. The more practice and hours you put in, the better your results will be. There's a whole host of macro photographers on Instagram that I'd encourage you to hunt for and have a look. I've also put links in the description below to the gear that I use, and that might give you clues and hints to the gear that you want to purchase. I've been thinking about making this video for months, and I would love to know if it's been helpful and what especially has been most helpful. What have you learned or been stretched on today? And I'd love you to share your results, and so please, when you post them on Instagram, tag me in or send them to me, let me know. I'd love to encourage you and learn from you. Macro photography is an art. It's not so much a science. There's a range of gear and settings that you can use, but this is what I've found helpful as I've learned along the way, which I'm sure will adapt and change as time goes on, but it works for me now. If you've enjoyed this video, please give me the thumbs up. It really helps, and you can ring that bell for the future announcements of other videos, and please subscribe, join the channel. Come on, let's go. Thanks very much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.